Welcome to social judgment theory and expectation violations theory. We're going to start with social judgment theory, also known as SJT for shorthand people. and here we go. The social judgment theory, it was proposed by Muzarf and Sharif. I hope I said those right. It centers on the concept of latitudes and how individuals judge and respond to persuasive messages. Now, by latitudes, we would describe that as something like your range of comfort, your range of your threshold of what you're willing to accept, to work with, to agree or disagree with. So that would be your range. I guess you could also go as far as to say your boundaries within the subject at hand. There's ego involved in this, and there's also 3 latitudes where we will go into this in a second, but the latitudes are going to give you the different categories and where these fall and how people judge these latitudes. So let's get into it. First, social judgment theory is, we have this great little infograph over here on the side, and it goes over everything in a nutshell. But essentially, the theory itself, again, just goes over how we define people processing messages and what they are willing to accept, not accept, and how they come to those conclusions, where their level of tolerance will be, and this is all mostly derived from your ego. Now, people might think that's a little weird because you think ego, you think somebody who's kind of like, at least in my head, I think of somebody who's very stubborn and stuck in their ways. But the deeper you go down the rabbit hole of this social judgment theory, the little more sense it makes because people are rooted in what they believe to be true. So if you believe something is true, your ego is going to have a stronger stance on it versus the other way around. So social judgment theory, it's going to highlight the ego, as we see here. It considers the concept of the ego involvement, as we just kind of touched on. It refers to how central or important an issue is to an individual. So again, if somebody has a lot of knowledge in something, they're going to be very stuck on what their beliefs are within that subject. If somebody is a pro at finances and credit scores, it's going to be very hard to persuade them into other ideas or thinking or ethical procedures about credit scores because, again, they're pros, so they feel very confident in it. This will give them, with a high ego involvement, this will give them a narrow latitude of acceptance, so they're not going to take a lot of grief. A wide latitude of rejections, meaning that they're okay with you not accepting their point of view from that or rejecting your point of view for whatever reason it may be. And they also have an extreme position of anger, meaning they are set, they are grounded, they are rooted like a tree in their decisions and why they feel that way. Now, on the other hand, somebody who has a low ego involvement in a subject, let's say the opposite, somebody who doesn't know anything about credit scores and they're trying really hard to get their credit up and make it better and whatever it is, they're going to have a wider latitude of acceptance, meaning they're going to be a lot more open to the ideas and the theories and the tricks of the trade, as they would say, in order to get their credit on track. They're going to kind of be like a sponge. They're going to want to grab at everything to come to their best conclusion. And in doing so, they're also going to have a high rate of latitude change because they don't know better. They're literally just fishing. They're fishing for an answer and they're going to use what works for them until they can become somebody who is a high ego involvement on credit. That's just what it is. So going into the latitudes a little bit more here, we see the latitude of acceptance. It represents a range of ideas or messages that an individual finds reasonable or acceptable based on existing beliefs, right? Latitude of rejection. This includes messages or ideas that are considered unreasonable or objectionable by the individual. So again, latitude of acceptance. Somebody is going to be more open to reasonable and acceptable things that they are not necessarily pros at and their ego's not involved, versus a latitude of rejection, somebody who's totally rooted in it, they know what's up, they know what's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on, and they are not going to be reasonable or persuaded easily by somebody with ulterior motives or ideas. It's going to take a lot more, which brings us to the latitude of non-commitment. This is a little interesting because the latitude of non-commitment, as defined, it says the latitude encompasses ideas that are neither acceptable or objectable. They are perceived as neutral or non-committed. So that might be somebody who has a little bit of knowledge of credit and, you know, everything is working for them in their credit score, but they're still a little, you know, neutral, they're open, but, you know, you may or may not persuade them. They really don't care. It could go either way. It's not the end of the world for them. And that, for me, in my opinion, might be just a little bit more imperative to the world today. I mean, sure, you have a lot of people who are very knowledgeable, but with Google at your hand, it's very easy to be neutral and understand that things are forever changing. There's a lot of information out there and you got to process it. Another thing I'd like to point out is that latitudes represent a range of ideas and messages that people find acceptable, objectionable, or neither, just like we kind of mentioned in parts. But when individuals hear a message, they compare it to their own anchored attitude or position within those latitudes. And then the theory also offers practical advice for persuaders, emphasizing on the importance of selecting messages to their audience. Now, this is where the ethical part of the theory comes into play, and it can get a little tricky because the ethical part of it is that, you know, should you be adapting messages to persuade people for your own benefit? I mean, it can go on and on. Now, outside of that theory, we also have this theory called expectancy violations theory, and I found this little comic. I thought it was cute. My expectations just got lower and lower. That's great. Well, eventually I'll be able to meet all of them. I mean, the joke is, and you'll come to find out, that expectations in itself are very complicated. And I say that because, you know, we have a lot of unspoken expectations that is a social norm. So let me go a little further into this. Chapter 6 of our textbooks covers this. This theory covers violating other person's physical and unspoken interpersonal expectations. It can be a superior strategy of conformity, but while the meaning of violation is ambiguous, meaning it can mean a lot of different things, it can take a lot of different forms, communicators with a high understanding can enhance their attractiveness, their credibility, and persuasiveness just by doing the unexpected. So it kind of teeters back and forth. And I say that because there's socially appropriate way of doing things, but there's also a unsociably ways of doing things, and those may or may not work. Some people can find a good balance between those, while others can't. So let's get started. We're going to start the personal physical space expectations. As you can see here, Burgon, I hope I said that right, defines personal space as invisible variable volume of space surrounding an individual that defines the individual's preferred distance from others. So think of like yourself and you're in this dome, almost like a snow globe. That snow globe dome is your domain, and everybody has a different understanding of how comforting that could be. Now that could be very close, very far. It could go a lot of different ways, and it's also derived on your cultural stance and how you're brought up. And again, social acceptance. Now, Edward Hall coined a term, proxemics. I think I said that wrong, but it's to refer to the study of people's use of space as a special elaboration of culture. Now, he believes that Americans have 4 proximity zones, essentially, of distance, and that effective communicators can actually adjust their behaviors to conform to those communicative rules of distance within their partners or any sort of relationship, really. So the size and shape of your personal space will depend on your culture and how you were raised, and your preferences. So as you can see here, here's a good idea of what those zones are. Intimate distance is, 0 to 18 inches. Personal distance would be 18 inches to 4 feet. Social distance is 4 feet to 12 feet. Public distance is 12 feet to 25 feet. Now, these are American standards, and I say that because in other countries like China, there's no such thing as a social distance and a public distance like there is in America. Their idea of social distance, the public distance, is probably completely reversed. I would have to do a little bit of digging, but you hear about it. It's one of those cultural things. If you look at the bottom corner of the screen, there's a picture of everybody kind of really, really close, and their papers are up in their face. I mean, that is China on their buses to and from work all the time. Where in America, that's not necessarily the thing. Like, people would get very upset about that. So our first example for the expectation violation theory is intimate relationships. I'm sure we've all had at least one. And it's very easy to understand once we go through this how those expectations can get violated. So we're going to start with intimate relationships. The dynamics and situation here is that, let's imagine we have a couple, Sarah and Alex. They have been in a committed relationship for several years. They have established certain expectations, norms, and regarding their personal space, boundaries, patterns, communication patterns, and behaviors within their relationship. The expectancy for one is the personal space issue. In their relationship, there is an implicit expectation of a comfortable and close, intimate distance when they spend time together. So this is part of their shared understanding of what their intimacy level is. The violation is what happens when the unexpected distance behavior comes into play. One day, Alex has been distant and reserved and physically creating more space between them than usual. So this will violate Sarah's expectation of the usual close proximities that they're used to, which is going to make Sarah go, what is going on in her head? What is going on? I got to figure it out. So Sarah will perceive, the perception part of this is that she will perceive that this is like a deviation from the norm. It's unexpected, and interprets it as a sign of emotional distance. There's something wrong. There's a change. She has to figure out what it is. The response would be Sarah experiences a heightened state of alertness due to this violation, which is very true, I can tell you from a woman's point of view. And she will feel the need to address and change to seek clarification of why Alex is behaving this way. The outcome, depending on how Alex will explain this to resolve the violation or not resolve, it could lead to various outcomes. So, if Alex provides a reasonable explanation, the relationship may return as the usual pattern. However, the violation remains unaddressed and is perceived negatively. It might lead to more tension and impacted dynamics down the relationship. So the conclusion is that the violation theory helps us understand how violations of personal space and expectations can influence the perceptions, arousal levels, subsequent responses in intimate relationships. It can make things better or worse. The theory will suggest that the interpretation of violation depends on the factors such as the nature of the relationship. In this example that I just gave, it does help us explore how unexpected changes in personal space within that relationship can create a shift. It can also create the shift not only in responses, but it can create a shift in something that's perceived negatively. Now, in my next example, this is more on a social level, like when you're out in public, and I'm using Mean Girls, the movie. Yes, I know, I love a good movie where you can visually see social dynamics at play and theories for this presentation. So, in the movie Mean Girls, this violation theory is that it focuses on a high school environment, right? It has various cliques. You got the jocks, you got the geeks, you got the drama, you got the goths, you got all kinds of stuff. And then the plastics are like the popular pretty girls, right? And they're led by Regina George. If you've never seen the movie, but we're gonna go through it real quick. And they are the popular exclusive group. Now, Katie Heron is the new girl. She enters the scene and she unintentionally violates expectations and norms of the social hierarchy. So this is going to create a lot of problems, right? So the social hierarchy norms, meaning within that high school, there are established norms and expectations regarding their hierarchies. The plastics are at the top, and there's an unwritten rule about who is allowed to interact with them, what is allowed, what is socially acceptable, so on and so forth. The violation is when Katie's interaction with the plastics comes into play. Katie is new and she's not like aware of the social norms because she was homeschooled and lived in Africa most of her life. So when she comes into play and approaches the plastics with attempts to befriend them, her behavior actually ends up violating the social expectation and norms of how students would be interacting with the popular group. So the perception is that the plastics, especially Regina George, their leader, perceives Katie's behavior as totally unexcusable, unexpected. It is deviated from their social norms, meaning it is not going to be allowed. She is not going to have it. Katie's entry into their circle seems to be a violation of not only their social expectations, but also how their hierarchy is ran and what the public expect from them. So in response to this, Regina George and the plastics, good old plastics, respond to this violation by initially being intrigued and then end up being manipulated to Katie and then from Katie. And Katie then learns that she is trying to serve her own interests, which would also fall hand in hand with the social judgment theory, if we really think about it. So the response involves both curiosity about the violation and a strategic use of Katie's actions for their benefit. So the outcome is a story progresses. Katie's violation of social expectations leads to conflict, manipulation, reevaluation of the social dynamics within the high school and the groups and how everything is. The violation sets off a chain reaction or a chain of events that disrupt the social order and result in both positive and negative outcomes for the characters, all the main characters involved. So the conclusion here is that the expectation violation theory helps us understand how Katie's violation of social norms within the high school hierarchy influenced the perceptions, responses, and outcomes in the movie Mean Girls. The theory specifically highlights the role of social expectations and the consequences of violating those expectations in the social setting, contributing to that overall film. So in closing, we're going to come full circle. I got a couple other movies here. I love a good chick flick, and I love the social dynamics in it. It's probably one of my biggest guilt trips. Luckily, my husband likes to watch chick flicks with me, so that's great. Now, while both theories are different, they do prove insight on how individuals process and respond to messages and social implications. They also address different aspects of communication. We're talking verbal, nonverbal, social expectations. Sometimes they go hand in hand. Sometimes it's two of those three. Sometimes it's just one. There are still some strong connections between the potential intersections of both theories. Like, to me, they go hand in hand. You can't really have one without the other. Now, while the theories may be applied independently, they do share common ground, and they understand how individuals process information, how they're judging these messages and expectations, and how they're responding to the expected or unexpected expectations and behaviors. I believe Legally Blonde, for example, the main character, Elle Woods, challenges the social expectations of stereotypes, aligning with the expectation violation theory. She is perceived initially as a stereotypical dumb blonde. She violates the norms of society by pursuing a law degree at Harvard. Like it's hard? Her unexpected actions challenge the conceived notions or preconceived notions that, she's just there to get attention. But at the same time, it's evident that the other characters, including her peers, her friends, professors, they all judge her capabilities based on her attitudes and her ego involvement, which is the social judgment theory. But the film illustrates how Elle's character, her journey through it disrupts those expectations. She overcomes it, leading with attitude changes and challenging the social judgments and coming out on top. The Devil Wears Prada, another great example. The main character, Andy Sachs, she's kind of this frumpy girl who never brushes her hair, defies the conventional expectation in the high fashion industry, the violations theory, expectancy violations theory. And initially an outsider of the fashion world, she totally violates the social norms by succeeding in her challenging role at Runway magazine. The reactions of her colleagues and her formidable and demanding and perfectionist boss, Miranda Priestling, they showcase Judgment as actively and consistently judging Andy's appearance, her competency, and commitment to the fashion industry. Again, social judgment theory. But the film portrays how Andy is unexpectedly successful and challenges the preconceptions, leading into shifts in the social judgments within that fashion content. Now, I know they're a little far-fetched because they're chick flicks, but I love them. And by integrating these two theories, I believe that it could potentially provide a more comprehensive understanding to the complexity of the overall communication process. So I hope you enjoyed my slideshow. I know it took a while, and let me know what you think. Thanks.